Karl Towns is now out for about a month. Let's say it's being positioned as 4 to 6 weeks, month and a half. That'd be. The Minnesota Timberwolves have been, I would say, the most disappointing team in the league this year. I know that they went through that little run where they won 5 straight games. You know, they beat the Cavs, then they got the win in Orlando. They got the win against the 76ers where Joel Embiid was playing, but he was really the only guy among their starters, like the big starters that were playing in that game. They got the win against the Heat. They got the win against the Pacers, and then, you know, lose to the Hornets, lose to the Warriors, lose to the Wizards. They've lost a game to the Knicks this year. They've lost a game to the Spurs. They've lost 2 to the Spurs. That's right. Like, the overall strength of schedule stuff that's going on with the Timberwolves is very concerning. And on top of it, now they don't have Towns. And if you look at the numbers, they've actually been drastically worse when Rudy Gobert is out on the court alone, as opposed to like both Rudy Gobert and Karl Towns, or just Karl Towns on the court. So this feels concerning to me. It also feels concerning to me that they don't really have a roster that is like totally optimized to be able to get the most out of Rudy Gobert, because Anthony Edwards is not like a drive and kick guy that's going to create open threes. D'Angelo Russell just doesn't have the ability to separate at a super high level in the same way that, like, say, a Donovan Mitchell did, driving and kicking and creating open threes that way. Kyle Anderson is just a low volume 3-point shooter. Jaden McDaniels, as good as he is not a guy that I think teams really care about him shooting from 3 at this point. So I just don't think that this roster is optimized for a lone Rudy Gobert lineup to be out there. And I worry that this thing could go downhill. I know they beat the Grizzlies on Wednesday, and like, I know that there's still a chance here that they could figure this out, but I think it's going to involve a lot of playing Edwards super heavy minutes, a lot of playing Gobert super heavy minutes, and you're losing all this time to try and figure out the Rudy Gobert, Karl Towns situation. It feels like a difficult needle for them to thread now the rest of the way.
Yeah, I'll tell you what concerns me about them the most. And man, I made this point to someone earlier this week, and I can't remember if I said it on a podcast or in a conversation with someone. So if I said it on a podcast, I haven't listened to that podcast. Sorry, I have to hear it again. The thing that concerns me with them, the reason, like the main reasons they went out and traded all that stuff for Rudy Gobert is because last year they had 2 huge problems. That number one was that they had to come up with a really kind of gimmicky, blitzy pick and roll defense because they didn't have good enough rim protection. And Rudy Gobert obviously solves that basically on his own. And number 2 was they were really bad as a defensive rebounding team. And Rudy Gobert was going to save that. One of the reasons lost the Memphis series is because Memphis was just flying. Like Brandon Clark was just destroying them on the offensive boards for Memphis. And Rudy Gobert is good enough to where it's like he's going to solve that all on his own. They're 26th in defensive rebounding. This roster is put together not to be like good at defensive rebounding. If you're going to be good with this type of roster, you have to clean up. And just like we talked about how the Knicks are squeezing a little bit extra out of their offense by winning the possession game, the Wolves are doing the polar opposite. They're getting killed on the defensive boards, and they aren't good at getting offensive boards. So that is just like doubling the problem. They don't create a lot of turnovers on defense, and they turn it over way more than they should on the other end. So they're doubling the problem on that end. It's like you are just giving away possessions. You are like, I don't know. I'm a Jets fan, so I'm used to this. I'm used to watching Mark Sanchez. Like this is not a way to win in a possessions-laden sport. And it's very concerning to me that the things that Rudy Gobert was supposed to clean up It's not like if they were like 15th in defensive rebounding, I'd still be like, that's a problem. If they were like 12th, that's a problem. If you're going to put together this roster, the point is you have to kill at like the size and grit and physicality things. Like that is the point of this roster. The fact that they are one of the 5 worst defensive rebounding teams in the league, that they're not finishing possessions, and that they are so losing the possession game to such an extreme, like that makes me really concerned, because it's one thing to be 11-11. It's another thing to be 11-11 against a soft schedule. And it's another thing to be 11-11 against a soft schedule and losing in the exact way you are not supposed to. And yeah. I am concerned. I am, whether, even if Towns had not gotten hurt, I would just be concerned. And none of this is even a commentary on the weird ass vibes that are coming out of that place.
Well, and like here's the thing. So they, according to Basketball Reference, have played the 3rd easiest schedule in the league so far. And they're sitting at 11-11. This is a team that almost more than anything was built to rack up regular season wins by destroying the glass, by being able to bludgeon teams, by being able to kind of control the paint in a substantial way defensively. But like, the other thing that really worries me is that a lot of the tape, like, I think that overall their defensive deficiencies in the regular season are probably slightly overstated. Like, they are still right around league average in defense, even with Karl Towns having to chase guys around. The problem is that like some of the tape that's out there of Karl Towns having to chase around 4s and like having to chase around guys on the perimeter, it's really bad. And it's really, really easy, I think, to scheme as you move up and start playing playoff level matchups where you have to win in a 7-game series and teams are genuinely scheming and throwing in different sets, throwing in different little mini looks that they're going to be able to run when you're having to beat a team 4 times in a week over 7 games, or 4 times in 2 weeks over 7 games. So
totally. I mean, look,
I'm
Towns,
worried about
like
that.
People talk about Towns going to be against all these stretch 4s. To me, that's not the issue. And that's not what we've seen. It's how is he against movement force? And that's really what it is. I don't really care that much about Karl Towns guarding a corner 3-point shooter. What I care is about Karl Towns trying to get around a pin down. We just talked about Obi Toppin, right? Like that's just like a bench 4, but the Knicks are running them off of pin downs. Like the Knicks are running them around screens. Like Towns having to guard that kind of stuff. First of all, that's exhausting for a big man. It's like really exhausting. And second, I mean, especially one who has to carry the offensive load that he does. Second of all, that's just not his defensive skill set. Not that he's some elite rim protector, but I would rather have him guarding some sort of standstill corner 3-point shooter than guarding movement guys. And if you can get him onto cutters and curlers and all of that, then you can do some stuff.
Well, and here's the other basic thing, right? So Karl Towns right now is taking 14.4 field goal attempts per game. That is down basically to his rookie year level in terms of shooting volume. Regardless of what you think Anthony Edwards can be in the future, Karl Towns is your best offensive player, and you are reducing his output offensively with what they've tried to do. And part of what they've tried to do is incorporate his passing ability more. And I think that he has probably been unselfish to a fault, trying to integrate all of these pieces long-term. But man, it just feels like it's so clogged up on offense every single time that I watch them. Like Karl Towns likes to go down on the block and like likes to try and like bludgeon a guy who's like a mismatch 4, right? Or if he gets a guard on him. It's hard to do that when Rudy Gobert is right next to him because you get that help that's automatically coming over. It just feels like a roster that actually doesn't accentuate their best offensive players' skill set more than anything. Like, you can say that you need a great defender next to Karl Towns, but like you maybe could have tried to trade 2 first-round picks for Miles Turner this summer, gotten 80% of what Rudy Gobert brings defensively, got the floor spacing maybe, and then tried to make it work that way, right? Instead of giving up a shit ton of assets for Rudy Gobert and taking the ball out of your best player's hands more often, basically. And this isn't necessarily, I don't think that it's Rudy's fault. I just think that it's a byproduct of what's happening with this team so far.
I think that is very well said.